Hey guys, welcome back to Release the Craftin. Priscilla here with another episode of Storycraft. And, yeah, you guys, we're still doing Tales of the Paranormal. We've been doing that for a few weeks. We're going to do it for a couple more weeks leading up to the pinnacle of the spookiest of the season, Halloween. We're going to do spooky stories for a couple more weeks still. And, I hope that you guys are loving this series. I'm really enjoying it. I honestly could do spooky content all year long. And don't tempt me, because I will. But there's other stories I want to tell you as well. So we can't do spooky content all year. But I'll definitely bring this segment back for sure. Right off the top, Storycraft is a series where I tell you a story while I do a craft. And if you're just joining me, welcome. If you're returning, I hope you're doing well. Thanks for coming back. And just, on the same order of business, if you've been listening for a while, you've probably heard me say this a couple times. It's okay, just bear with me. I'm still accepting story submissions for our October Ghost Story Spooktacular special. I've got a couple of ghost stories from you guys already, and they are amazing. I'm not gonna brag about it, but some of you guys have some genuinely spooky, scary, excellent stories, and I would love to have some more. I'm just so excited because we're gonna have this awesome power hour of scary stories that are true because they're from you. And so if you haven't already, send me your story. It would make me ever so delighted, and if you don't send it to me and you're just sitting on your spooky story, that makes me sad, and you don't want me to be sad, right? That's not good for any of us around here. So, maybe just send me your story? Okay, great. So, glad that you're working on that. You can find the way to send it to me in the description box below. It has all of my socials, so you can Instagram me, email me, message me, all the ways to send me your story. So please, if you haven't done it already, do that because it's going to be amazing. Plus, the more stories I get, the more I have to craft, and the more stuff you guys get to see. So it's a win-win for all of us, I think. Plus, who doesn't want just a big block of the spookiest of ghost stories to listen to on Halloween? I know that I do. So, we're going to work on this. We're going to do it together. It's going to be amazing. But on that note, I have a spooky story for you guys today. It's a very ghosty story, as you will see. And I will just say before I even start the story that this story is one giant content warning for violence against women. So if that is something that triggers you, I totally understand. Catch us on the next one. I won't do a violence against women story next one, so it'll be a safe space to be at. But this whole story, it's not great. But maybe the ending is okay. You'll see. Stick with me if you're not triggered by violence against women. If you are, I'm sorry. There's a whole playlist of stories that aren't nearly as upsetting as this one's going to be. I just wanted to make that clear off the top because I don't want to be surprised by what happens here. But the story I have to tell you guys today is about a well. It's not just any old well. It's Okiku's well, and it's currently known as Okiku's well. It actually is a well that existed and currently exists. I don't know why I'm saying it's not around anymore. It's still a well. It still exists. But it's a well that resides in Himeji Castle in Hyogo, Japan. And you might be wondering, how come Okiku has a well in Himeji Castle? And I'm about to tell you. But to tell you, we have to go back to the way, way long ago. So we're going to go back to Japan's Edo era. So picture it. We're in Japan. It's in the past. We're at Himeji Castle. And here we meet Okiku. And Okiku is the daughter of a local officer who lived a relatively modest life until she turned 16, where she was sent to work for a samurai who happened to reside at Himeji Castle by the name of Aoyama. This was a really common practice for the young women of her status, as it meant that she would be well taken care of, and she would learn the manners and the ways of an upper-class home. So she would get, lessons in decorum and how to conduct herself, and these would be marketable skills that she would be able to present to whatever family she chose to marry into because she got her training at the castle. Okiku, fortunately, was a very beautiful and dutiful young woman who served the family very well, so well that she caught the eye of Aoyama himself. He would often badger her to become his mistress, and she would refuse but continue to serve the family well, cooking, cleaning, and tending to their every need. She was so good at her work that she was trusted to look after the family's treasures and valuable heirlooms, as well as some of the heirlooms of Himeji Castle as well. Everything was fine for a while, and Okiku was able to gently rebuff Aoyama's advances without much difficulty until the day that he came up with a plan. So around the time of the New Year celebration, which is a huge celebration sort of on the level of Christmas in Japan, she was told to retrieve a set of 10 priceless antique plates from the family's treasure vault so that they could be brought out for the festivities. And when she went to go get the plates, she discovered that there were only 9. And as if on cue, Aoyama appeared and told her that he would keep the secret of her failure to guard the family's treasures if she would just agree to become his mistress once and for all. So Okiku, she turns to look at the plates before her. She counts them again very desperately. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. At which point, Aoyama then addresses her again, pitches up his fantastic offer to not go tell her family and get her in trouble for losing one of these priceless plates. All she has to do is become his mistress, and she looks at him, her heart filling with horror. She looks him right in the eye, and like the little badass she is, she says no. She still rejects him, even when she's in such a desperate state. And this threw Aoyama into a blind rage, at which point he drags Okiku in front of his wife to reveal the shame of the missing plate. Angered, his wife, who clearly wasn't hearing anybody's side of the story today, condemns Okiku and calls her all sorts of names, and she demands that Okiku be punished, and Aoyama decides that he's going to be one to carry out the punishment. So he tells Okiku that she has 10 fingers, just like they had 10 plates. Then he takes his sword and removes her middle finger so that she'll always be reminded of how she absolutely ruined the entire set of plates. Then they lock her in a room for 3 days without food. So while she was locked away, Okiku dreaded the shame that she would bring upon her family when word of her failure got out and when they saw her missing finger. Clearly, she wouldn't be able to go around town and just pretend like everything was okay with a missing middle finger. And she wondered at how a plate could be as worth as much as a whole finger for a person, like how the plate compares. And she absolutely lamented her luck. Like she knew that she was doing her job and some great misfortune had led to that plate being missing, and she kind of had a sinking feeling she knew what that misfortune was. Eventually, she was allowed to return to her room and reserve her service in the palace. Sans a finger. That very same evening, the very same evening that she's allowed to return to her services and her duties, she passes by the well outside of the palace on the grounds, and it's evening. And Aoyama, king of perfect dramatic timing, appears, and he propositions her for a final time. He tells her that this is her last chance. He can preserve her reputation to her family only if she agrees to be his mistress. And with all of the distrust in the world weighing heavy on her heart, she refuses him once again. This sends Aoyama into another rage. He has no chill, you guys, and he slew her on the spot. When he finally comes to his senses and realizes what he's done, murdering a young girl on the palace grounds, he decides to discard her body down the well that they were in front of, and then later on comes back to drop the 10th missing plate down there with her so that no one will ever discover that he had been the one who had stolen the plate the entire time to try to force her hand. So Okiku lies at the bottom of the well in a deep watery grave, and no one knows where she's gone. Aoyama himself washes his hands clean of the matter, but this would not be the last that he would hear of Okiku. For you see, in the late hours of the evening, a voice would rise from the well, sort of a watery, submerged, but light, feminine voice of a young woman would rise up from the well and could be heard to anybody passing by counting. And it wasn't just counting anything. This voice was counting plates. 1 plate, 2 plate, 3 plates. Her voice would then follow the people who heard it around the grounds of Himeji Castle. Some of the workers there would report seeing her pale apparition emerging from the well or floating around the grounds. And these stories were quickly dismissed by Aoyama and his wife. They would insist that Okiku had returned home in shame, but everyone knew that this wasn't the truth, because even though they didn't have the internet, they knew full well that Okiku had been punished for plates. Now there's a voice counting plates, and no one's seen her around the village or the town since then. So over time, the presence of Okiku would begin to torment Aoyama. In the night, he would hear her ghostly voice coming from the well, counting away. 1 plate, 2 plates, 3 plates, 4 plates. He would close his heart and cover his ears to her mournful counting. In the day, his attendants would whisper of Okiku's curse and warn against hearing her count to 9, for everyone knew if she counted out 9 plates to you, she would scream and you would be cursed forever. Don't ask me how they knew. They just be knowing things. One day it was discovered by the house staff that their lord, Aoyama, was missing. No one knew where he had gone to, and as the days passed without any word from their master, the servants and his wife began to fear the worst. They would speak softly of how Okiku's ghost must have finally claimed Aoyama, and how he must have finally heard her counting all the way to the end, and she claimed him as a victim. Others believe that he had in fact heard her count all the way up to 9 when she unleashed her terrifying scream, and he was driven so mad with terror that he threw himself into the well, eventually down there to join her eternally in the place that he tried to hide her away in forever. Unfortunately, even after Aoyama's disappearance, this didn't stop the manifestation of Okiku. Her voice could still be heard. People were still heard to be cursed after hearing her count all the way to 9. She still continued to haunt the castle, and this was still a problem for everybody else who was living there. So after the death of her husband, Aoyama's widow, after the proper mourning period, would then go down to the village to seek the help of a local Buddhist priest to come to Himeji Castle to exorcise the well of Okiku's presence forever. So the monk sat in front of the well in the early morning and meditated throughout the day, and then continued to meditate well into the evening, when finally he heard Okiku's voice begin to rise from the well once more. 1 plate, 2 plates, 3 plates. She began to emerge from the well. 4 plates, 5 plates, 6 plates. She was fully out now and drifting towards the monk. 8 plates, 9 plates. And before she could scream, the monk jumped up and yelled out, 10! And then he saw the ghostly face of Okiku smile sadly. She had finally found the missing 10th plate. Her soul was appeased, and her ghost returned to the well, never to be seen again. And that's the end of the story for Okiku. People still believe that her ghost still resides there, although she's a lot quieter now. And every now and again, people will report hearing her call out from the well or hearing somebody counting. It's said that if you're at Himeji Castle at night, you might hear somebody counting behind you, so you are not supposed to turn around and you need to run away before she gets to 9. But those are sort of maybe lingering energy superstitions that have just hung around, little rumors, because it seems like there hasn't really been any other outburst from Okiku's well, which you can actually still visit, because like I said, it still resides at Himeji Castle to this day. You can actually go all the way up to the well and look inside of it, take your pictures there, all that kind of stuff. It's a really beautiful well as far as wells go. And, yeah, it's actually, if you haven't guessed already, Okiku's well is actually the inspiration, like the direct inspiration, for the character design of Sadako from the Japanese horror movie Ringu, which you might know, as Samara from The Ring. It's also believed that her counting of the plates might be the inspiration for the 7-day timeline in the film, but this is kind of a bit more speculative than actual fact. But Okiku is the direct representation, her and her well, for the well that Samara rises up out of during The Ring. And I just thought that was like a really cool connection between the two. I love when, folklore imitate, like, inspires art. And that's how we got the ring. And the ring is genuinely terrifying. So, you know, it was a great thing to come from it. There's also some paintings I would suggest, if you are interested, to go look those up, of Okiku coming from the well, that are actually really interesting. They're just a lot of like old ghostly paintings that might be something of interest to you if you are interested in that. I think that Okiku's story is really sad, like really, really sad. Like, you know, she was just trying to do her job and she didn't want to date this gross older guy who was already married. And he let his toxic masculinity like take over his brain and murdered her just for rebuffing her, which is a real thing that like a lot of women have to deal with even to this day. So like I think that's what makes the story ring so true, and why it's kind of like stuck around in my brain for a while, because it's a very real experience to have, and her story is just so sad to be like so desperately trying to fix the error of the plates, to make up for the fact that, you know, she got punished for something she didn't even do, like all that guilt that weighed on her, that shame, and that she was more worried about like what would happen to her family when they found out that she had, you know, failed in her task, and like the damage that could have done to her reputation. And for all of that to happen, all of that to be weighing on such a young woman, and then have her murdered for it because she didn't want to date some creepy old dude, like, it's just, the story is kind of gutting. And like, I'm glad that there's sort of a story where she gets to at least be at peace after death. There was, I saw in my research, a sort of a moment where they had sort of talked about Okiku's ghost sort of coming back for vengeance, because for a while in that area, the wells in like the 70s, where like the water was coming back really like sour and acidic tasting, and they couldn't figure out why until they discovered that there was actually like a type of larva in there that if you disconnect your brain a little bit, you know, like unfocus your eyes a little and look at the larva, it kind of looks like a sad young woman in a robe. Which led to people calling them like Okiku bugs, and the bug actually turns into like a really beautiful butterfly, but they don't know why. Like for that year, all these butterflies were laying their eggs in the wells, and the larvae were turning the waters like disgusting. So for a while they said Okiku had returned because, you know, she had been poisoning the wells, but then, you know, she disappeared, and there hasn't really been like an outbreak of stories about Okiku since. So I don't really know if that one is super connected. There are a couple versions of this story where Aoyama kills himself after, you know, like being tormented by her ghost to sort of make it stop. And there's some versions where it's like more romantic and they were actually in love, but he ends up killing her to like cover up his affair. And it's just, you know, none of the versions are good. This is my favorite version, I think. It's also the most upsetting because she has to get like tortured, and then, you know, she doesn't even get like respite from the torture because she gets immediately killed afterwards, which is probably the most cinematic version, I guess, which is why I like this version the best. But it is just a really sad, poignant story of a sweet young woman who has to become like a ghost to get like vengeance. And I'm glad that she got it, because fuck Aoyama. Fuck that guy hard, because he sucks. And yeah, that's the end of my story. I hope that you guys enjoyed this episode of Storycraft. Let me know if there's any stories that you would like to hear. It can be any theme. It doesn't have to be ghosty. I already have a list of non-ghosty stories that you guys have requested to do. So once the Tales of the Paranormal segment is over, I'm going to jump right back into those. So if you would like a non-paranormal story, you can by all means request it now. I'm still working towards my goal of 100 episodes of Storycraft, so any suggestions are super helpful, especially if it's like a story that you're familiar with. Like if there's like some kind of story that you heard a lot as a kid growing up, I would be really interested to know like that, and just, you know, chase down that rabbit hole of folklore or myths or fables or anything like that. But yeah, I'm going to jump off here. If you made it to the end of the video, I appreciate your faces, and I'll catch you guys all in the next one. Until then, happy crafting. Bye!